we back in? You can hear me anyway, right?
It's just we need it for the intercom. Sorry, so it should be able to work in the night.
Testing, testing. Does that work?
Yeah.
That works? Right. Okay, so all of these, well, you've turned me up. You've turned me on. So this modelling has been done taking the approach of saying what would the rate increase need to be in the first year if we were to still deliver the capital program on this side as unchanged and still remain under 230%. Okay, so we've got two columns along here. One, so this is no capital change. So the Boorman East extension we talked about is that adjustment is not in this, and this is showing that the rate increase, if you had a $250 UAGC in these 3 areas over 1 year, 3 years, or 7 years. And I need to make the point that the UAGC would only come in line with the time period. So again, if we looked at 3 years, the $500 UAGC would come in over 3 years. So a third, a third, a third. And the third year it would be up to $500. This last column here is 7 years without a UAGC. And bearing in mind what we communicated before is that if there was no UAGC in 7 years, all things being equal, a $750,000 house would be have the highest rates in the country. On this side is if we do the capital adjustment. This is if we move the Boorman East extension from year, there was $1 million in year 2 and the remainder in year 3. If we moved it and put the whole Boorman Road extension into year 7, this column here is whether we would have $250 UAGC transitioning over the time period or a $500 UAGC transitioning over the time period. Again, 7 years only down here with the capital move with no UAGC. Are there any questions? Ryan.
Thank you. Just a little one that came to mind then. Moving Boorman East extension out, thank you, would have any particular impact on growth in the city, the ability to bring sections on board, or it's negligible? No. Thank you.
No.
Ryan?
So Dave, obviously people they see the 9.6 and go, yep, that's cheaper rates for our constituents. But could it be with the transitional periods that someone, even though the rates might be set at 9.6, with a lower UAGC, the actual quantum of rates could be greater?
Yes, this is an average rates increase, but once we get to 100% capital value, then the rates increase will be the 9.6. But as we transition,
yeah,
be on average.
But during the transition in the next 3 years, could you have a lower rates bill in total if the rates was 9.7, but you had the $500 UAGC transition versus the $250 transition?
Yeah, it would depend on the size of the property and the size of the land.
So my point I just wanted to make for elected members is just because the rates percentage is lower doesn't necessarily mean with a lower UAGC, their actual quantum of rates may not actually be lower.
So basically, you're right, so that we're pretty much talking about a shift of capital value. The curve's going to be like this. The $500 brings it down a little bit, the extremes, and then the $250 brings it down slightly less. So it means that if, depending on where you are on that curve, you could actually be going down or going up relative to that 9.6%. So it's, without modelling you a whole lot of examples, and it depends on your relationship of your land value to your capital value and all that sort of stuff, it's quite complex. But yes, you're right, at a principal level.
Councillor Mark?
So when do we balance the books with these models? This isn't year 1, is it?
No.
No. This is the whole premise behind the 230% is to be able to deliver the capital program.
Right.
But when we saw some modelling before, predominantly it was in year 4. worst case scenario, but years 2 and 3 were quite
Getting closer.
a minor deficit.
Right.
And yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Gary?
Thank you. Years beyond year, so you've got 1 year, 3 year, 7 year, 7 year. Whenever there's a UAGC finished, when you finish the third year, does the UAC go up by the 3.8% as well? Pardon? So it does. It does go up by 3.8%. So,
Yes,
so it was,
we're wanting to index the rate increase and the UAGC at the same. So the same
okay.
movement.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question of between the 250 and the 500? The 500 presumably is a greater cushion around extremes than the 250. How does that look?
Why does it happen?
Well, you said if we don't have a UAGC where the highest, become the highest rates for a property is 750. So the whole 1 point of a UAGC at 500 as against 250 was to try and get a flatter, more cushion. How is that significant or not?
So basically, even at most of the other metropolitan councils have fixed rates greater than $500, right? They're actually quite a lot higher. So their curve has been flattened out quite significantly by a significant fixed charge. So by going to 500, we're still got quite high rates at the 750 mark. If we go to the 250, we're going to be even higher. And if we don't have it at all, we're going to be the highest.
So the effect of the 500 is to
Level out the curves, the extremes.
level out the curves. So that's a tighter compression, so
Yes.
to speak.
Yep.
But it can affect individual ratepayers quite significantly. If you're in a low CV house, then quite clearly the percentage increase may be quite higher.
One thing that we've always talked about is that the value of the improvement on the piece of land and the size of the land that improvement is on will determine the rate of increase.
And that we still have that problem with the separately, whatever the U was, soup. Yeah, but I can't remember what they were. That definition. There was an unexpected consequence of that. That a lot of people that you would not consider them to be separately something. What are they called? What is it? Separately. Sorry.
SUI.
Yeah, but what does it mean?
Separately used or inhabited.
So each issue
Used or inhabited. So separately used or inhabited property. Part. Okay, part. Yeah, and it's kind of got to a stage where every bedroom was being. No, that's not quite that part.
No.
Every bedroom had a bathroom or something like that was getting hit.
One of the confusions was the understanding of SUIP
Yep.
and whether the $500 was in addition to the rates increase, and it's not.
No, I understand that. Yep.
So, but if you have 2 SUIPs on 1 rating unit,
Then
there is an additional
yeah.
UAGC.
Yep. And that was. Look, I'm not knocking the staff. We just didn't consider that when we saw that, and then I've seen situations where people's rates are going up 200% over the 2 years.
There will always be.
And these are not
examples.
Yeah, but unfortunately they're not individual. There's a lot of them, and it's typically our lower income, flatting type units. But anyway, they come. High density things, yeah.
But the 250 per will be less, because that's 2 versus 500. It's less in terms of the individual application. 250 is obviously $5 a week versus $10 a week.
Yeah, but if we settle on the 500,
yeah.
If you have a block of 8 flats with not much land around, then there'll be a number of UAGCs.
And the goal was to try and mitigate the wham up for these high capital intensive, and that is a high capital intensive one, and it is getting the thing that was supposed to muffle or suppress their big rate jump is actually double hitting them, isn't it?
Well, and fundamentally the UAGC is...
And look, I'm not saying I disagree, but I'm just saying that's something that we got lots and lots of feedback from, and it seemed to me to be a very, very obvious situation where there was an anomaly or it didn't really...
Sure. So a couple of points on that. Like there are 55,000 houses, residents in Hamilton, right? So, and there are a number of properties that are one owner residents that will benefit from having UAGC as in not having a higher capital value calculated rate. There are those scenarios where you do have blocks of flats that are on a small piece of dirt that will have to pay subsequent SUIPs, and that is a consequence.
And if we do that on a per weekly basis without being flippant, one's $5 a week, rough, or $4.50 versus just under $10 a week per resident, per SUIP, is that right? I mean, all I'm saying is I'm looking at it on a per weekly basis. All right,
So the rent.
you know, you sound, it's a per weekly.
So if the landlord passes it through on his rent, that's what he'd be doing. Yeah. He or she would be doing.
So can I just
Yeah.
add to it? We had some submitters in the I'll call it the university precinct, and we looked at one of those properties. Without the UAGC, their rates were about $500 per unit, and by per unit we're talking about
Per annum, per year, you mean?
Yep, and they went to $1,000 per unit effectively because of the UAGC. So they talked about a large dollar rates increase, but on a per unit basis, they went from $500 per unit to $1,000 per unit. Because they had 6 units, it was a $3,000 rates increase.
It's $9 per unit per week versus $18 per unit per week.
And so the UAGC policy that we've adopted is based on identifying dwellings, and we had a briefing session where we put up a large number of examples from the ancillary dwelling on a section with another house, through to a variety of multi-unit examples, and we had quite a discussion about what constitutes a dwelling. We looked at a lot of flats that have shared access, but they're advertised separately for rent. They're advertised as self-contained dwellings for rent, and none of the examples we heard through the submissions were inconsistent with the discussions we had in that briefing over what the policy should deliver.
And of course we assume, irrespective of how a household is constructed, it's using the services, the water, the rubbish, all the other things. So you have a scenario of one unit paying $8 a week versus $16 a week, when $250 that'd be in between. Well, obviously, you know, the impact of that would be less. So,
isn't it though fair to, or reasonable to consider that at only paying $500 a year for a soup, which contains a toilet and a bathroom and presumably a kitchenette of some description, is in fact a significant underrating to the value that occupant or landlord gets? That's $10 a week for water in, water out, and rubbish collection, just on its own, without any other idea as to what rates cover.
But that's not all their rates, eh?
That's the rate for one unit, $500.
Plus the capital value part of it.
Yeah. No.
So there's a capital value minus the 500.
No. Currently they're paying $500 a year.
Stephen, can you? That one, as I understood it,
not only
that was as I understood it, that they worked it out per unit. They were paying $500 a year, with on that unit. You know, the unit people live, household kitchen toilet.
Yes.
And then with the UAGC, that was going up to $1,000.
Yeah.
Year. So per unit was going from $10 a week or $9 a week to $18 a week.
Yep.
And then in return for that, there's the rubbish, the water.
No, that's all included.
Yeah, I know. What I mean is, it's with respect, even at $18, with respect at $18 a week,
it's not
to get
value.
water and rubbish, and let alone toilets. Walking out and enjoying all the other facilities, probably a good deal. Sorry, Councillor Bunting.
Yeah, look, I don't opinions or sharp and take a brief, but what happens if we spread that? Say we've got between the 9.6 and 9.6 more, we spread that over 2 years.
You'll collect more.
It'd be about 2 sevens if you did it over 2 years. Yeah.
You collect less revenue in the first year, which means
Yeah.
that you won't have that compounding impact of the revenue in the second year, and means that you'll struggle to stay within the 2/3.
So that would be added on to the already 3.8% that's going.
Yeah. My rough calculations was 9.6 plus 3.8 divided by 2. You know, about 2 sevens.
You're saying 7,
Do we, I'm trying to think, to get people who wrote their signatures on the board to get some indicative, and this subject to, is everyone happy at this point? I run this meeting on a committee basis where we don't do formal votes, we just go around the table and see where people are at. Are people happy with that I run the meeting in that way? So in the end, we will arrive or not at a consensus. Then obviously at that point, standing order split, there'll be a formal motion, there can be amendments, and then the set piece debate and formal standing orders will apply. I'm just trying to see which ones you would eliminate first stop, and I'm just, perhaps if I just go through and take the 1 year plus UAGC, this is the original proposal, and we worked through to the status quo, which was the 7 years transition without UAGC. The 1 year plus UAGC, is there anyone who would be inclined to support that? Sorry, Leanne, give me advice so I'm doing the right thing. No. Where is Mr McPherson? Well, we'll come back to, well, obviously we'll go around, then he can give his votes at the end. So can I just have an indication?
Do you want to stand up here and...
Yeah, it would be good. I'm just trying to get the mood.
So, what do you ask?
Does anyone support this? I think he's asking.
Yes. Does anyone support the 1 year transition, which is the top grid, 1 year plus UAGC? Please come back, Councillor McPherson. Where are you?
No, he didn't. Anyway, I know that.
Maybe you go around the table.
All right.
And Richard tick the boxes as to which one.
All right. So would you like us just to say what your first preference is?
Yeah, and
all right.
perhaps why, which...
Okay.
I don't know. Pardon?
Well, this is without prejudice and without any way getting an indicative vote. Without prejudice about you're going to have the vote. We need to, what I'm saying is I'm trying to see which we exclude, unless anyone can, because what I will do is I would be inclined to put the motion that would roughly be as close as possible to the consensus, then you can test it. All right? So Gary, what's your preference?
Yeah, I've described this as, you know, changing the deck chairs on the Titanic, and we shouldn't be on the Titanic.
Yeah. Of course, we know that, absolutely.
Yep. So I think we are. Just remind me again, so that the thing we're trying to achieve here is this is a model which all of those give us, we never break out 230%. Do they all achieve balanced books at when, or is that where they differ?
By at least year 4.
They all achieve balanced books by year 4.
Yep. And years 2 and 3.
And they all have the subsequent years being 3.8, 3.8.
Correct. Correct. In general.
1 to 2 million.
1 to 2 million.
Except for the first year, which is, I think the first year is
9.
about 5 or 7.
Sorry. What'd you say, Stephen?
The first year?
Can I just remind you that
Oh,
the rating system
yeah.
we're doing, right? Yeah. This is the lowest rates we need to hit the 230. The next part of the decision, because what you'll be doing is voting on whether or not what your rating system is, revenue UAGC, and move women or not. Then you'll make a decision whether or not you do 2 years at 7% and so forth. So this is just to get the minimum percentage we need to hit the 230%. Then it's the rates increase after that.
Or it's considering moving the 230. You don't want to do that. You don't want to touch the financial strategy.
I don't want to touch the 2030 because it's got other ramifications more than our financial strategy.
Absolutely.
I know, credit rating,
Credit rating.
a few
Cost
other
of borrowing.
things.
Look, I'll play this a different, look, I'll just,
Yeah,
can
yeah.
I have an indicative? Does anyone really want to, hands up if you still want to deeply discuss the transition over 1 year? Is there anyone who would like to deeply discuss the transition over 1 year, which was our original proposal? So that, at this point, without prejudice, is a 0. Hands up those who are now looking at a 3-year transition plus a UAGC. Don't talk about 250 or 500. The people who are looking at a 3-year transition.
Which is this option here.
You can put your hand up more. Anything along that line.
Yeah, anything along that line. You put your hand up more than once.
3, 4, 5, 6.
It's not binding.
It's not. This is not binding. This is not binding. No, it is not. It is absolutely not binding, and we are not using the board. Please note.
Can you take names beside that 7, please?
No. All right. Right.
Paula,
No. All right. So can we actually go now to the 7 years?
Yeah, I'll be keen to discuss that still.
With the 7 years plus UAGC. Right. There's one person who wants discussion. 2 people who like further discussion.
So can you clarify when you talk about 7 years, you mean the remaining 7 years?
yes.
The remaining 7 years, and the UAGC is the 7th, right?
Can I just ask the question, why do we need the UAGC if we're just continuing along our pre-set 7-year? Because there is no change.
There's only to address the fact that we will have the highest rates for $750,000.
It's cushioning.
So that just takes brings the curve down slightly and redistributes the rates within the rating pool.
Okay, that's a scenario maybe I've had and to be honest, I've been out of the meeting for a long time. I've been in and out badly, so maybe I never saw the UAGC coming up against the 7 years. Oh, you've got 7 year only underneath, yeah.
That option's still there, Gary.
Yeah, beg your pardon. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
And so that's still on that. And then the last one.
The last one who is doing nothing, absolutely nothing, just carrying on with the current transition. To CV with no UAGC.
That, but I like that. I mean, how do you,
Bearing in mind that you'll need to put a
Line-
motion to get to there.
line 2, line 3, line 4?
discuss it, because that was one of the key preferences.
Yeah,
And obviously I anticipate there may be a notice of amendment. I'm just trying to then work out what we would be what item we would be debating as the base motion. Then
So someone's missing what's it up there?
He hasn't done anything.
What's yours, Martin?
What's yours?
well, mine is the 3-year transition,
That makes it 9.
and I'm evenly I'm flexible.
No,
whether
that was
it's
8.
250 or 500.
Line you want.
Yep, that's line. That line.
Is it
And
possible,
Andrew's not here. So we're going to remember.
is it possible to ask then, with those 3, who's keen on keeping the capital list as we've got it, or moving Borman Road capital out? Because that's the 2 sides of it. So are we all agreed on North and Borman?
Does anyone have a massive discomfort following the advice from Chris Allen at this point that Borman Road be moves out? It's not ideal, absolutely.
So
But
basically we're over this side of the... Yeah. Okay.
You're not at the top, no one's in favour of the top line.
so no one at this point wants to pursue the 1-year transition, and this does not preclude anyone putting up an amendment at the right time for democratic debate. But at this point, without prejudice, no one is pursuing the 1-year transition at this point. There is
That's the end of a rate increase below 10%.
No, on the other side, move Borman Road.
2 there, Gary.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon, sorry.
so where's the impact of Borman Road on there? Is it the right-hand column?
Without
Is it
Borman Road.
under 250 UAGC or 500?
Yes, and this is without moving Borman Road.
Oh, okay, all right. Can we find another couple of Borman Roads, Dave? Yes, please. Several?
Something in Dinsdale would be
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, something in the West.
See it without Peacock? shutting off Harrowfield from the rest of the city?
Right, we're moving on,
sharing, Chair.
So we have the 7-year transition, and we had a couple of councillors who wanted to look at that.
Oh, not the bottom one, the next one up.
We might as well eliminate the one where there's one person, Councillor Ange.
No, I think there were two.
Okay, eliminate that.
Perfect world, but it wouldn't be 10.5.
Yeah.
You can vote for a perfect world, just pass the motion.
No, I mean, basically, we now
That one
move,
plus
I
7
think, and
Bournemouth
without prejudice, we now move to the middle options.
So we're basically now in a discussion for these two options with two variations on each. So you've got 3-year plus UAGC with a 250 UAGC or a 500 UAGC, or a 7-year with the UAGC with the 250 or the 500. So the numbers you need to be focusing on are those 4 numbers there.
The smaller the UAC, the smaller the rates increase.
As a percentage overall.
Yeah.
But the bigger the pain for, yeah.
I mean, the larger the UAGC is the better of what we call the cushion. But the smaller the UAGC at the moment is that it's a bit more spread out.
Just bear in mind, these are average rate increases, right? So
yeah, this is the average rate.
So you
because
might
there are
reduce
always
the
going to
average.
be winners and losers. We're just trying to work out that to reduce the pain, if you like, for the losers in this scenario.
yeah, I think the important thing though is there's always a range with an average rate increase,
Yes.
and with the UAGC the range is not as great. So without a UAGC, you've got some extremes on either side. So even though the average is
So what is the significance between 250, so I'll just finish, then I'll go to Paula. What is significant between the 250 and the 500? That's what I'm trying to tease here in terms of that range.
well, the 500 will give a bigger cushion, like you said before.
Right. Paula? Yeah. Paula?
The 7-year plus UAGC, I didn't ask about that because I was looking at the 3-year. Is that 7-year transition to UAGC?
Yes, it is.
Thank
So
you.
that's continuing current transition over 7 years of capital value, but introducing proportionately UAGC along the way. Ramping up to 500 or 250 by the end of 7 years, 1 hit each year.
And you know, well, I don't want to revisit a previous decision that I lost, which is fine. But in all reality, Chris, is that the only infrastructure that can be slid back?
Yes.
Pardon?
Yeah, look, I've looked at, that's my recommendation, looking through the list.
Okay. But, you know, but if we'd have given the directive to find more, you'd have found another one, wouldn't you? But anyway, that's good. Okay, thanks. That's clear.
So just,
Sorry, can I say?
yes, Gary.
It seems to me to be a fault in that model. The higher the UAC, oh, sorry, yeah, I got it. You need to, yeah.
Ryan?
I got it. Sorry.
You're right. Ryan?
I just want to explore the UAGC because I think everyone's looking at the lower rates increase. But for example, if with the capital value transition and the volatility, even though we're proposing an average rates increase of 9% or whatever, someone could still end up with a 21% rates increase.
Correct.
And with a third transition to 250, they're not going to have much buffer, are they?
Correct.
Their rates increase will be higher.
What would the staff recommendation be on the 250 or the 500 in terms of a financial?
That would depend on how big of the cushion you want. But if you have a $250 UAGC, you will have some ratepayers that have a lot higher rate increases than they would under a $500 UAGC.
It's not just about.
Can I?
Yeah, it's not just about cushion. It's actually there's an equity discussion around it, eh?
Yeah, if we go back to that Manhattan chart that was in the rates. Thank you, mate. Highly technical video screen here. So this is in the rates proposal. We've seen this before. It's on the wall in the room next door. That showed that at no that our highest value homes with no UAGC when we get to 100% CV, are going to pay some of the highest rates compared to everyone. And by introducing a $500 UAGC, that resulted in a drop of around about $400 on those highest value properties. So that's and our lowest value properties had an increase of about $150 because our lowest value properties were paying some of the lowest rates in the country. So if you half that, then the effect is going to be half.
Right. Dave and then Paula.
Yeah, look, even though I didn't support the UAGC, and philosophically, if I have to have one, I'd rather have a lower one than a higher one, I am tending towards Ryan's viewpoint about the 500 one because it keeps more of our community on side with us. There's less extremes. I wish we didn't have one at all, and I curse the staff who told us about it, but they've been telling us about it for quite a few years. It's the first time anyone's listened, David, so there must be... I just think, you know, when we're in a difficult situation like this and we're putting up rates and we've got a lot of problems trying to cover our costs, the more extremes you have varying from your averages, the less buy-in you get from the community. So I'm sort of tending towards the 500 for that reason, even though it's not what I would philosophically want.
Just before I go to Paula and Mark, can I just, for the rest of the country, I'm just wondering, that's the other, I think it's important, roughly, what is the average? Most local authorities charge UAGCs now?
So there's another chart in the...
Yeah, okay, it'd be quite useful just to see what the rest of the country is doing.
So
Sure.
Speaking to this, to the other chart, if we go to $500 UAGC, we end up with about 15% of our rates collected on a fixed rate. A fixed rate being a combination of a UAGC or a fixed charge for water or refuse is typically what council will have. That would make us second lowest to Christchurch, which is around about 10%. Made up of a fixed charge and a UAGC. But if we look at our neighbours in Ngaruawahia, they are paying about 80% of their rates on fixed charges or UAGCs. Targeted rates, yeah, that sums it up. Although you can have capital value targeted rates, so these are fixed targeted rates. Just looking at this sample here, the average is probably about 50%. Of the rates fixed as opposed to on capital value.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get a...
So in Tauranga,
yeah,
they've had an $840 UAGC, and that's been in place for a few years. And they've got water meters.
Oh.
So it's Hamilton is very uncommon to have such a
high... back across the Kaimai straight away.
A high percentage of our rates based on...
the climate here ever again. Right, Councillor Paula.
Yeah, so just to explore this UAGC thing and you know, thank you for being so reasonable in our conversations, because I know that we don't agree on this, but it's been a very respectful conversation and I appreciate that. There are some, with rates, we've got to apply a couple of things, right? Ability to pay, that's required to consider ability to pay. Got to look at the benefit received for the rates, which includes direct benefit and indirect benefit. And they've got to be generally justifiable. You might look at things like the current, future, social, economic, environmental needs, wellbeing needs of the community. Now, while I accept for the most part that CV has some relationship to household income, that's not always the case. A UAGC, when I've done all my reading and all the councils that I've looked into, is based on a relative benefit in regard per person, and there's usually been some analysis. I know you're not going to be surprised about this, but this is for public debate as well. Relative benefit in regards to the people, and they've done some analysis about what the common benefit might be for the ratepayer. We've done none of this, and I do find it a little bit difficult. I don't disagree with you. It might, if you did the analysis, it might come somewhere about where you've pitched it. But you literally did say, and don't take this personally, as you went. Well, apparently you can. You literally said though, didn't you? Felt right. Felt about right. So talk that through with me. I'd like to see. I do understand that the uniform annual charge has some merit in buffering effect. It is regressive. It's widely, every piece of literature you read, just read a paper from Massey University, describes it as a highly regressive rate. In other words, it transfers wealth from the wealthy to the cost.
I think part of that may be in the bigger, broader debate, but we'll have a neutral response from our
I've got to be a bit careful.
public servant.
One of the writers of the legislation's in the room.
Is that you?
No, it wasn't me. The legislation has all those things that you said in it, in the first part of the legislation. But in the second part of the legislation, there's a clause that allows council to decide what's appropriate. And that's distinctly separate from considering all those things that you've considered. We have considered all those things you've considered. It's in our funding needs. You mentioned it's in our funding needs analysis. And that's where and that's the basis of our capital value rating system. In the move to 100% capital value, something that we didn't consider 3 years ago was the distribution of the rates over the whole city. And so it was in this, in our research and studies and analysis of these effects, that we became aware that with the rates increases that we were proposing, that our highest value properties were going to pay the highest rates, and our lowest value properties were paying the lowest rates. And it was through that process we decided that wasn't appropriate. I didn't decide, but we considered and recommended that that wasn't appropriate, and that a UAGC is a good tool to mitigate that impact. And through the task force briefings, we started out 125, it went to 250, and then it went to 500, and we looked at those options. And it was at the $500 mark that the mitigation on the highest value properties and the effect that that has on the lowest properties was deemed to be appropriate. And that is a perfectly appropriate and lawful process for council to determine. It's our understanding that 3 other councils, including Christchurch and Auckland and Tauranga, do not have a calculation methodology in the way you describe. So we're not alone in deciding what an appropriate UAGC is.
Two more small.
Can
I just continue with
supplementary question? Did the Shand report have anything to say about this when they supported capital value?
I can't recall.
Did they have anything to say about UAGC?
I can't recall.
Okay, thank you. Paula?
I'm pretty sure they did, but it's a while ago.
I'm sure they did, yeah.
Just so following on from that then, although I might disagree with some of that
Yep.
later, but that's fine. Just indulge me on this one. Is there going to be any future, say if we transition, say if I'm flexible, sorry, say if I'm flexible and I acknowledge there will be a transition to a UAGC, will any effort be made to determine what the value that UAG represents the ratepayer is? Are you going to, or are you just going to continue with a just feels right kind of approach? That's
a decision of council. I've been involved in rating reviews all around the country, and we come to different decisions because that's what different councils want. So that's a decision for council to make in the future.
And one last question, and I don't, look, we've got to explore options. So this is a bit of sort of a out there question, but some submitters said, in terms of the balance, right? Some said, why are some people's rates going down? Why don't we hold the lowest ones where they are and move from there rather than bring do you see what I'm saying? But some people are actually going to get a rates reduction, and I wondered what your comment on that was.
So that was well understood at the time we made the change to capital value. That the change to capital value would have the effect of reducing rates. That effect is quite large in the commercial sector, and we've had our briefings with the heat maps that show that. So certainly everything we've seen in that regard is consistent with the decision that this council made 3 years ago. In terms of a floor on the rates change, the legislation does not allow it. Special legislation was put in place for Auckland when they went to capital value, and they were able to have a floor and a ceiling on that change. There is no lawful ability for us to have a floor under legislation in terms of a minimum decrease.
Okay.
But the issue at the moment, and the argument around transition, is under the current land value, you had properties of a lesser value overall paying more rates than of properties of greater value purely because of the distribution relative to the building and the land. So in the end you had two properties, one was worth X amount more and one was worth less, but the property that's worth less, because it might have had a bit more land or whatever, was end up paying more rates. So in terms and I think the Shan report, as I understand it, was about issues of equity as well. It is.
There's sure to be something about uniform charges in it, but I don't recall.
Yeah. Sorry, Mark.
Thank you. I just want to just briefly address the 7-year versus 3-year thing, and I don't want to underestimate or undervalue the very real pain that comes with the perception of breaking another promise. Now, I think the message has been sold pretty well that something needs to be done, but I'm very cognizant of those submissions we had, especially that very powerful one from Centre Place, Chartwell and the base. And I know people have various feelings on on the base and the likes, but these shops that have budgeted for their 10-year plans. To get to that 100% CV, they very reasonably came in and said they're not complaining about that. It's just the sudden jump, and I wonder if that 3 years isn't still just a little bit sudden for them, because that will have a rather dramatic trickle-down effect on retailers who are finding it very, very hard under the best of conditions at the moment. They're up against the onlines, and etc. And I'm not moving into debate or anything like that, but I just want to make sure we are very aware that, as well as the pain points, which I think the UAG CV address really well, the other pain point is that broken promise or that broken expectation, and just that's why I'm floating between the 7 and the.
Just as I understand, and I pick up the I don't want to be. Hamilton Central City Business Association, obviously they didn't want, because it said 50% of the members were winners, 50% losers, and they preferred the transition.
Absolutely.
Their second fallback was a 3 year. So I'm just, now, this can be saved for debate, but it can be argued that we went out with a proposal for a 1 year transition. We are, with respect to the new council, different from the older council, and we did get that whole issue of keeping. So you could say, rightly or wrongly, that the 3 year transition is some form of compromise from our original proposal, and it lands between the 1 year and the 7 years. So in total, instead of a 10-year journey, it is now proposed to have a 6-year journey with, of course, the important addition of the UAGC, which is and the argument of the UAGC is to try and to act as some form of cushion to smooth out. And that was my thinking, Deputy Mayor, behind asking for 5. In terms of equity, and without getting into debate, there are many people, older people, who might pay $4,500 rates on land value. They're paying up to $90. Widow living on her own, or no one, is paying up to $90 a week. Then you have someone in a unit paying $5 a week. So in terms of, there's the balance between what is a reasonable rate and justice versus use of services. But I think there's probably debate, really. Does she get the sitting use, or? Pardon? I don't know her. Don't know her at all. Okay. Thanks. No, I just wanted to sort of not at all. Keep that in people's thinking. You all know that this, with respect, there are in this system you can quote a series of winners and losers in this system, and you know those examples just as you know the other examples.
This debate is basically the debate about property values as a means of gaining revenue is totally... unfortunately, we're in that system. So, kind of, with all due respect, grizzling about that is pointless because it's the rules we have to work within, and you can grizzle about it, but we've still got to make a decision within these rules. Yeah.
If I, to test the meeting, if I suggest that we put up a base motion as the start point, and then we can obviously take amendments of the 3-year plus UAGC of 500. I'm happy to move that if I have a seconder, just to get the seconded Councillor Hamilton, just to get the discussion on the road. Councillor Pascoe. Yeah.
Continue your discussion, Martin.
Yeah,
I mean, rates are a tax, and I don't believe there's any tax in any tax system that falls fairly on everybody. No. So no matter what we do here, we're still going to have what you call, a group that you call winners and losers.
Absolutely.
And there's no way that we can select one of those options on that matrix, or indeed any other option on the matrix, which is going to present everyone as a winner or a fair. It's going to be fair to everybody.
They all win because they live in Hamilton.
Well, not a win on paying a tax anyway.
Not if you're in Bourman Road.
But I think the point, there's two issues in any system. You have winners and losers, but also we are constrained by legislation of how we fund local service and local government. And obviously, in my view, the system is severely broken.
And that's Gary's.
And that's Gary's point.
But then income tax is levied on income, and there are different variations to what is taxable income.
Income tax obviously has a greater sense of ability to pay, whereas obviously rates are a tax on asset.
Not necessarily. But anyway, leaving that aside, I don't think there's an answer that will be fair to everybody in that matrix, or indeed in any other one that we might try.
I've put, I just want to see if there's any violent objection to this. I've put a base motion up, which, if we can get that on the board, please, just to start.
Can you help assist us, what option?
So the option that has been put forward is option B. But it's a combination. So basically, it is the rates to be based on a moving to capital value over 3 years. Oh, I'm looking at page. Yeah, it is one of those things. I'm trying to build the recommendation, so it's a combination of two. So Sean's got that. So it's this one here with that $500 UAGC. So you want to give the wording to democracy, please? Yeah, they've already got it.
So currently, the right-hand column is not available because there's a resolution required for that, isn't there?
Do you want a fallback motion? Do you want
Councillor.
This is going to be the base, then we can test the other options, right?
Because you were saying before, if we fail with if you're putting a 3-year one up, if that fails and there's no other motion up there, then you fall back to what you were proposing year one.
Yeah, so you need to move an amendment. So that's the base one, then we need an amendment.
Okay, so the amendment that I will put then, because you're going to need another one, otherwise you're going to go back to what we all don't want.
Yep.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, so I put an amendment of the 7-year plus UAGC.
Okay, so that'll be amendment.
Which UAGC?
The 10.7.
250. So there's an amendment that's, you seconding that. So there's an amendment being put forward by Councillor Caston, the 7-year plus UAGC, with a 250 UAGC, and that's been seconded by Councillor Bunting.
Was it 250 or 800? 500,
500.
500. Either one. It's only what point. It's only
250. Sorry, my apologies.
So 500, right? Okay.
500's fine.
Yeah.
500. He's changed his mind.
So basically, we have a base motion
And an amendment
of 3 years and a UAGC of $500, and we have a foreshadowed amendment of amendment, sorry, of 7 years and a UAGC of $500. All right. Could we just do them? If we're zeroing in on that, are there any other notices of motion, just indicative at this stage?
I give a notice now of a foreshadowed amendment.
Yes.
Of 3 years plus a 250 UAGC. So that would only get voted in if James's gets voted out, get voted on, I should say, if James's gets voted down.
So you're doing 3 year plus 250 UAGC?
Yeah.
Just a point of, you keep on using that right-hand column, which doesn't exist yet. That resolution hasn't been passed yet.
No,
So
we're
we-
putting a resolution.
No, but we know what the effective is.
Oh, is that going to be part of this resolution too? Is it? The Bournemouth, so just to be clear, does everyone know that every one of these resolutions is going to have a tag on saying Bournemouth Road moved out? Okay.
And can I be crystal clear that once we arrive at a determination on the rating system, then I'll be vacating the chair for the mayor to resume the chair, because at that point, then you make the final, you strike the final rate. Okay? So, I'm sorry. Look, thank you, Councillor Tooman. Sorry, apologies. Wasn't looking at the board.
That's all right. It's just a question I have, and I probably won't get an answer to it.
Order.
But what I would ask the staff is, these guys have been donkey deep in this stuff for a number of months now, you know. What's the best option for the council and for the community, if they'd be prepared to?
Council and?
The community.
And the community. Well, I'm not sure if that's a value judgment or what is the best option for the council and the community in terms of the combo?
I don't think it's appropriate for me to give my personal view.
Unfortunately.
I have a view, but it's a personal one.
I think, Councillor, they've given you the impact, and obviously they have focused somewhat on the cushion issue. They have pointed out that if we go on a certain way, we have properties at the highest rates in the country because of the lack of spread, I think.
Yeah, it's just that I respect their professional opinion,
Right.
that's all.
Sorry, now I've still got, Ryan, did you have another question? I had something showing up on the board there.
Seeing this is all in the air of possibilities,
Yeah.
we're just wondering if we've got James's amendment up first. We're just wondering if we can, if as your seconder, I can make yours the foreshadowed motion, and then foreshadowed amendment, and then Dave's would be the fallback as the motion.
Well, I'm relaxed. I'm relaxed either way. I want to arrive at where we're.
The new order is going to be, the motion is, I feel rightly, is a 3-year UAGC at 250.
Yep.
James's amendment.
That's the base, yes.
So
Put that first.
This one here is
The first,
number 1.
the base.
Then number 2 is the amendment, which was yours was 7 years at 500. And then this one is the amendment.
Foreshadowed.
Foreshadowed. Okay, so motion?
Yes. Yes.
2, 1, 3.
So basically, the base motion is James. Excuse me. The base motion. The first amendment. The first amendment is James's amendment.
Second amendment's the one about guns, isn't it?
The second amendment is.
The Trump amendment.
Yours and mine. Ours is the foreshadowed 3 years. With
And
the
then the
500.
final fallback is the 250.
Yeah.
Right. So in sequence, in order of voting, we're going to be voting on the 7-year transition plus UAGC. The next, and if that wins, obviously, then that is the resolution. If that fails, then the next will be the amendment of the UAGC of 3 years plus $500, and then if that fails, then we go to the UAGC plus 3 years plus 250.
Plus the
that
deferred
right?
capital.
Okay.
Is that the right order?
I got it.
They've all got that. Oh, didn't they? Yeah, that's right.
So that means that the last one, if it fails, we go straight to UAGC and 100%.
But we're testing as we go.
I know, but you want your last fallback, don't you, to be more representative of what we've currently got
The last
now?
one won't fail.
Oh, sorry, I've got no place to say.
Someone can also do a foreshadow.
Nice going, Councillor Bryant.
We're all just trying to get there. Sorry about this. Trying to get the sequence. I just, is that right?
No.
We're just trying to work out where.
Chairing, very clear.
So it pits the final vote between, on a 3-year thing, between 250 and 500.
Which are the favourites, I think, really.
Sorry?
Yeah, I can live with either of those. For 7 years.
I think actually most people can hear.
Yes, it is. Foreshadow is 3-year UAGC at $500.
Staff can't keep up. Richard can keep up with it.
Richard, did you say 400?
No, 500.
Good.
There was an extra 100 in there, Richard,
Can I have some quiet just to make sure everyone's on the same page, please?
including the chair.
Okay. Right, everyone's talking across purposes. So the team in the corner, our initial motion is 3 years UAGC at 250, right?
That,
Then
can I
we've
just,
got a
sorry,
amendment.
sorry, Chief
500.
Executive, so that is the Gallagher motion, is that correct?
No.
No, that's the,
The original, this is as I understand it, the first amendment to be tested is the 7-year plus UAGC,
That's
right?
correct.
That's the first one. The second amendment foreshadowed to be tested is the 3-year plus UAGC plus 500. The final motion, if those are unsuccessful, is the 3-year plus UAGC plus 250. All right? Yeah, that's the motion. The motion. I mean, the motion if the others are unsuccessful. If the amendment are not adopted, that is the third cab off the rank.
Except it's in debate against the other two.
Yeah, it's always, and we'll obviously take debate at the same time. At that point, at the point at which I start this process, then standing orders will clearly apply. You have one shot, as you know. We have a 2-minute limit with the right of extension, obviously. And then at the point at which the speaking list... Right. Status quo. Well, unless something else comes up, it's status quo. If all three fail, you're either on the you just carry on the journey we're on.
That's the one year. That was the question that I raised earlier.
Yeah.
We don't want to be what was in here.
And you could have another one. If not, if you didn't speak.
I know, so wondering if, as long as we've done the numbers, make sure we've got some survivors, some designated survivors, basically. Doing it by exception, it's not a delay.
Yes, tick. So, councillors, the governance team have captured the translation between council and Sean Hickey, and we have something.
Right. I'm acutely conscious at least one councillor has to leave early, but we're due to go till at least 8:30. But I do want we can get on with the start the debate. So basically, if we can we have the motion now. No, hold on.
Doing them all together.
can you just colour would you like a hard copy? No. So can we just colour?
Are we debating them all at once?
You're not recording,
That's mine. I thought mine was $500.
I thought it was too.
I thought mine was $500 and the McPherson one was $250.
No, actually, it's got that the wrong.
It's
That's
wrong.
not right.
Yeah, that's right.
The foreshadowed amendment is the motion.
The foreshadowed amendment is the motion. So the motion is the 250.
No, the foreshadowed amendment is 3 years at 500.
Wrong mover and seconder. Just change the mover and seconder, that's all. 250.
It's just the movers and seconders haven't been captured against the right motion. Let's give you that.
Jeff's line is not.
It's the motion. That is the motion. So I'm going to take that as the motion.
I just want one person, please. To
Yeah,
tell
so
us
this is
what's
where the motion is McPherson Taylor, 250. The First Amendment is the Casson, which is the 7-year transition. The Second Amendment is the Gallagher, the second foreshadowed amendment. If that fails, is the Gallagher Hamilton one of 500.
No, foreshadow should be 500 UAGC.
That's right.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
That's right.
So we are now, have we got the right, it's all, tell me when that's right. So basically, we have the motion as moved by Councillor McPherson Taylor. So I'll say that approves the rates be based on 100% capital value from year 3 of the 10-year plan with the following transition, approves a 250 UAGC from year 3 of the 10-year plan with the following transition. That is the motion. That is the base motion.
That's correct.
Since when we have had an amendment from Councillor Casson, seconded by Bunting, that approves the rates was 100%, but there be a 7-year transition with a 500 uniform and charge by the year 7 of that transition. That is the amendment. There's also a foreshadowed amendment moved by Gallagher and Hamilton of a 3-year transition, but with a $500 UAGC. So I now have a motion on the table. I will ask the mover of the motion, would you please resume your seats? I'll ask the remover of the motion to speak to his motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't wish to speak for very long at all because I think the issues are pretty well canvassed and understood by people. The reason I'm proposing that is because that is the lowest rate increase, average rate increase to ratepayers that's available under the realistic scenarios. And I think it is important that we try and get that as low as possible. The biggest issue that we had across the board with submissions was the quantum of the rates increase. And I think we should be trying to keep that as low as possible. The motion does that, and it gives a 3-year phase-in of CV, which I think is important because of the dramatic changes that involves. I don't think we can afford a 7-year there. I don't think the ratepayers can afford, in a personal sense, the 7-year transition. I think when you add the 3 years transition we've already had to the 3 years yet to come, that's a 6-year transition, which is a reasonable compromise in the circumstance.
I now ask the mover of the amendment, Councillor Casson, to speak, please.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Look, none of us were voted into council here to rape and pillage a city of their hard-earned money, and I think we're all now in a position where none of us really wanted to be, where we're having to vote on one of these solutions for our city finances. But look, we've had the shopping centres, the base and Chartwell Square come into us, and a few other members of the public wanting the 7-year switch to capital value. That's what was promised by the previous council to them, and that's what they've put their plans for transitioning on. Now, we're breaking that promise. Unfortunately, there's a few broken promises in this 10-year plan, but we're breaking that promise and taking it down to, well, the recommended was 1 year or the 3-year. The 3-year is a lot more palatable than the 1 year. But I think it's important to keep the promises. Obviously, the rate increase is 10.8%. That's a hell of a lot better than the 15.5 we started with, or the two 9.5s. There's a lot of people out there would be hurting a lot if we went to the 1 year and the 9.5, 9.5. This is softer. This is a little bit easier to stomach. That's the reason why I put it forward, because I don't want us to fall back on the 1 year.
Thank you. I now have Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, look, it's a very fine balance, I would suggest. I'm supporting this one because I think that is the closest to the path of best return and least pain, frankly. I do value the submissions very much from the base and from Chartwell and from those multi-businesses or whatever it is who are going to see dramatic changes. Like I said in my earlier diatribe, they don't complain about the overall climb to capital value, but it's the speed at which they were introduced, and a lot of work went into that promise. I'm with James. None of us are comfortable having to ask for more rates, but we've got to remember that rates are not just a blind tax. They are what people are paying for the services that we provide. We've had a good couple of days now thrashing out what services and what level of services we should provide. We had some wins, we had some losses. Now we're working out how we're going to charge them and what's the least painful way. The kind of people I've talked with over the last 3-4 months have been generally people who suddenly have found the issue has been the suddenness of this change. They have bought the message, or they get the message that things do need to change, but it's the suddenness of change that is causing these people in Rototuna and in the East Ward to go, holy moly, I might be out of a house or I might not be able to afford to live. So it's the suddenness of the change that that has been the most jarring message that I've seen over this consultation period. So with that, I'm quite happy to support this amendment.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Look, we're going down the right track, certainly by a transition. There's no doubt that the most extreme, well, to me, the most extreme visceral reactions that we got in the submissions were based on the fact that we were trying to transition in 1 year rather than what was promised. So we're going down the right track there. In terms of phasing, because particularly as we are hitting them with a big rate rise, so in my view the phasing is absolutely crucial. Having said that, I am supportive of the motion, the 9.6 250 UAGC. At this stage it is far from perfect. It phases much quicker than was originally expected, but all the same I think it will soften the blow significantly. So at this stage I support that particular one, but I have plenty of interest in the foreshadowed amendment.
Councillor Pascoe.
Thanks, Chair. I'm supporting the 3-year CV transition, $500 UAGC and the 9.7% increase, a resulting 9.7% increase. Although it's not perfect, we promised ratepayers when we moved to CV that there would be a 10-year transition, and we have breached this by recommending a sudden change in these deliberations. So I see the 3-year having regard to the submissions that came in as being a compromise on our part to move away from 7 years to 3 years. The $500 UAGC I believe is fair in the sense that it recognises a service level provided to property owners by council. Lower CV properties pay an annual rate that in my view will more fairly reflect some of those basic services that council provides. The original rate increase is to balance the books. The original rate increase that was submitted in the deliberations, or rate increases over 2 years, was to balance the books as quickly as we possibly could. Under the 9.7 rate increase, this will not occur, and council will remain in a balancing the book deficit in those initial years of this 10-year plan. This contravenes our financial policy to balance our books. A concern I have is that this council and or the staff will not be sufficiently disciplined in that period when we're still not balancing our books to appropriately spend the allocated amounts that we have in this new budget specifically for maintenance and renewals that hasn't been there in past budgets. And that's a red flag to me. It's something that we can exercise some control on. And I think no matter which way we land on any of these options, we need to make sure, and our staff need to make sure, that that discipline does remain. Thank you.
Thank you. Point of order, Councillor Bunting.
I do this politely and as unobtrusively as I can, because I don't want to wait till you'd finished speaking, but I believe that Councillor Pascoe was arguing for something that's not actually on the table yet, for the foreshadowed amendment. Is that...
No, he was making reference to a foreshadowed amendment that was coming up. He was giving his reasons why he wasn't supporting the amendment in the base motion at this point, because at the moment all we're doing is we're debating the amendment in the base motion. He was explaining why he favoured neither. Councillor Southgate.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I want to be very clear at the outset that I do not approve of many of the priorities or projects that create the need to raise these rates. And I'll talk about that a bit later when the adoption of the plan discussion occurs. I also do not take any responsibility for any financial hole that we fell into earlier last year. I support, reluctantly actually, but I have to support at this stage, in the series of votes that we have before us, the amendment of the 7 and the transition to a uniform annual charge over 7. I've made no bones about it that I felt uncomfortable with the rationale around a uniform annual charge, but I accept the view of staff about balancing out the impact on ratepayers. The best way to have saved ratepayers' money, of course, has already been and gone, and it would have been on not to spend on things that were not important work at this time, or that didn't add value at this time. So, yep, that's where I don't want to be all sort of dramatic about it and go no to rates increases, because I accept that the reality is that we've got to pay to run this city. We've got to do things for this city, and we have to raise the rate somehow. So out of all of the options that are currently live, this is the one I favour at this time, the amendment.
Are there any more speakers? The Chief Executive has requested...
Speaker.
Oh, Councillor O'Leary, sorry.
Sorry, just a question to the Governance Manager, or to you, Chair. This is the final vote of the night, right? This bakes in the entire, depending on where we land.
No, it doesn't.
No.
What it does is it sets the rating structure. Then we've got to agree some remission information and some SUIP information. Some rating remissions, then it's the rates increase, because you've still got the option, Councillor O'Leary, of splitting the increase. This is the minimum increase required to hit the 230 in 1 year, but we could still hit the 230 by increases over 2 years if we chose to. So we still haven't had that discussion yet.
If I may, Deputy Mayor, just Chair. So the document that Sean handed out at the beginning that says deliberations meeting, if you look at page 9, that's where we are now, and you'll see that there's some structured recommendations following that.
Right.
Now, if my understanding, if there's no further speakers, what the Chief Executive has requested is we have a
2-minute break.
2-minute break, so that they can double check the figures. All right, double check the figures, and then once that is done, we're in. That's what I've been requested. So we're going to have a 2-minute break, and then we will obviously go to the vote on the Casson amendment.
We're going to refer to it as an Andrew King 2 minutes, so see us at 4.
Just want to make sure.
No, we're not changing figures. No.
Want to be accurate.
I'm ready to explain. Ready? Oh, yeah.
We are now reconvened.
And at vote.
Mr. Chief Executive?
We're going straight to the vote.
No, I thought, why did we
Oh no, so all the team were doing was revalidating
That's
that
all I
the
want.
percentage and the transitions were reflecting the intent of the motion. They've done that, it's all sorted out, everything's fine and kosher. Small disclaimer.
Right, we now take...
I just have a request. Could someone please read out the, because I just can't, there's a few of us elderly folk here can't read the damn thing.
Yep.
Pardon? Oh, actually, there's... the cavalry are coming. Quick!
So, am I allowed to speak about what the change I made?
Yes, Stephen.
Thank you. For the move to capital value percentages, they're expressed as a percentage of the LV to CV ratio. The transition's always a ratio between, it's been 30, so it's 30-70 this year. So you'll see it goes to 40%, which is 40-60, 50-50, 60. So I've expressed them all as that percentage. So whereas the 3-year ones in the first drafts were expressed as 33, 67, 100, I've just re-expressed that same ratio by dividing the remaining 7 years by 7, and then so it's 23, yeah. Okay.
I mean, so for the first year, 40% of your property is rated on its capital value,
Yep.
and 60% is rated on its land value. Then it moves.
Yep. Then on the 3-year ratio, it moves to 53 capital value,
Right.
47.
Okay. Right.
Then it goes to 77.
I think we're onto it. I will now put the Casson-Bunting amendment, which is Amendment 1. Has everyone read that? Everyone clear what they're voting on? I will now please go to the voting board, please. So, yeah. So, order. I'm going to just freeze. I'm just waiting for everyone to be right. Please circulate. You've got the sheets of paper, which I'll be grateful to have. Thank you. There we go.
Chelsea.
Chair.
Ready to start your engines? There you go. Start your engines, Deputy Mayor.
Right.
You can do this.
Order. We now have the amendment number 1 in front of you, as moved by Councillor Casson, seconded by Councillor Bunting. That is the amendment that we are currently voting on. Please set the voting board, please. If you agree with the amendment, you're for. If you don't agree with it, you're against. Please commence. Oops, sorry, I made a mistake. I apologise. You know I'm the most IT challenged member, and I've just proven it. So start again. Right.
Gary, pull his card. Pull Gary's card. Wait a sec.
Can we? I think he's just thinking. Could we get? Councillor Mallett is still there. He just thinks we've voted. Sorry. Can we see if Councillor Mallett's there?
He's off. He's gone. Pull his card out.
No, he's on the phone. He's coming in and he's just answering an urgent call.
Excuse me, the vote has been called.
Order.
No one can talk.
Right. I'm obviously, if we can, and please bear with me, and I apologise. Is he likely to come in or not? He's coming. Right. Sorry. Order, please. I apologise. That was my error. I mismucked the vote. We're voting again on the amendment moved by Councillor Casson and Bunting. I will try and do it personally correct this time. I voted. I pressed the against.
Did you push your card in?
Yep, there we go.
Yeah,
Here you go.
the vote is, it is 4 votes for, 8 against. That is, the amendment is lost. We now go to the foreshadowed amendment as moved by Councillors Gallagher and seconded by Hamilton. That's at the top of your sheet. Do I have any debate on that?
So that's, councillors, that's this item here.
Yeah. No, this is a foreshadow. If anyone, this is the foreshadowed. This is a new amendment. So those who wish to speak may do so. I'm conscious. Hopefully, we will be disciplined. Councillor Hamilton.
Quickly, this is the best of imperfect situation. I think it's meeting the previous arrangement of council's commitment from 7 years to 3, and the UAGC. From the $500 to the $250, although it could potentially impact the rates from 9.6 to 9.7, that 0.1% difference on the average rates is $2 at the average rates end, and yet the effect of that extra UAGC will have a better equitable rate across the city. So I do believe that's a fairer way of implementing it. Thank you.
Councillor Pascoe.
Yes, Chair, I've already spoken in favour. I've already spoken to this motion on the understanding that earlier on you mentioned we speak to all three of the amendments, but I don't really want to repeat it again. So I'll be voting in favour of the foreshadowed amendment, which is now the amendment. Thank you.
This is the only time I'll obviously exercise my speaking right, and then we go to the right of reply by the move of the original motion. My view is basically reflects Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Pascoe. However, obviously, that is my preference for reasons of that cushion. I think everything else has been well traversed. Thank you. Are there any other speakers before I go to the mover of the original motion for right of reply? Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. I think in light of the overall package we've put together and the reasons for the effects of the $500 UAGC on the significant rate rises that we are going to see for some people, that it is better to actually vote for the amendment. Even though I moved the motion, I'm calling on people to vote for the amendment on this case. Don't look so stunned, Your Worship, Your Deputy Worship. Right.
So, in exercising your right of reply, you are now supporting the amendment as moved by Councillors Gallagher and Bunting. Is that correct?
I think that's what I said.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Right. We now. Moved by Gallagher and Hamilton, I beg your pardon. Sorry. Gallagher and Hamilton. Right. We now go to the vote on the amendment. We're voting on the amendment as moved by Councillors Gallagher and Hamilton. That is carried.
Carried 8-4.
I now will move that now becomes the substantive motion. We clear the board again while we vote on the substantive motion. The amendment has now become the substantive motion. I wish to vote, the voting board now.
The amendment as a substantive motion is carried, 8-4, 4 against.
Get one there,
Thank you. Thank you. I now do vacate the chair, and Governance Manager or Chief Executive, would you advise the Mayor to resume the chair, please? Okay.
Thank you, Deputy
That's
Mayor.
all right. Thanks.
So, councillors, we're at point 8 on page 10 now. Oh, sorry, the top of page 10, SUIP and remission.
So we just need to bring the your card, mate. You get that here. Okay. So where are we at? So that's gone. Sean? What's the next resolution? G. We don't play this one. Anyway, councillors, the next resolution that's flagged in your paper is actually incorrect in that we already have that, which is resolution F, is already in the base budget, and so unless someone's got a challenge on that, sorry, my 39. Sorry, my paper's not missing. So if you look at the resolutions on page 39 of the council report,
the same resolution.
We're looking at F, page 39, F, and F is about approving the UAGC approach per SUIP. We don't need to do F, because F, unless of course there's a motion against that, F is what's baked into the base budget. So that's what we've agreed is how we're going to treat our UAGCs and how we're going to apply them. Yeah. And that was the premise that you guys effectively held as you were debating the last point anyway, but we have the opportunity to change that. But the staff recommendation is that we don't.
Yep, that's correct. It would impact.
So then we're moving. Mr. Chair, there's a question.
Yes.
And just we did hear from a handful of submitters about are challenging this, and if I'm reading in the report correctly, on page 72, you're indicating there that it says during consultation, a few submissions were identified that had incorrectly been identified as having an additional SUIP. These have been corrected.
Yes.
And then are you also indicating that if something like that comes up again, there's an option for them through the rates remissions policy, or it's just a correction that staff would do because it doesn't fit into the policy? I'm a bit confused.
Yeah, so to make the correction using the rates remission policy because it's just easier in our systems.
Okay, all right, and that nothing will change. There'll still be that opportunity.
Yes, that's correct.
Yep.
So they'll be charged ultimately the correct amount of rates.
Okay, yeah.
Just to be clear, what you're saying is that sometimes we've got the SUIPs wrong, and a person can challenge that, and going forward, that ability to challenge is always open.
Yes,
to correction. Okay.
And that's a statement about all aspects of the rating. If we get it wrong, we will fix it up.
For example, if a valuation happens to be incorrectly entered or something like that.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Yeah. Right, I understand. Thank you.
So then we're moving to the. So is there any other rates matters before we move on to the rates increase section 8? So now we'll move to, I'm trying to be the chair here just to move things along, page 78 and 79, rates increase.
Just a brief bit of advice to remissions. Did we do the no? Okay. Yep. Sorry. My apologies. Rates increase. So the rates increase can't be, if it's lower than 9.7, we breach our debt to revenue ratio. It is 15 point, I've lost the page I wrote it down on. 15.8 balances the books in year 1, so any number between those two is a rates increase, in a year 1 rates increase. If you wanted to spread 9.7 over 2 years, it would be 7.7.
Oh shit, sorry.
If you wanted to spread it over 3 years, it would be 6.2, 6.2, 6.2.
So,
Just to be clear, this number we're looking at, isn't it? Yep. And what's the other number, was it, Stephen? 15 point.
So the balance of books is 15.8 in year 1.
Yep.
To do it over 2 years is 2 7s.
7 and 7.
And to do it over 3 years is 3 6.2s.
So I'll move 9.7.
so,
Is that what we have to do?
yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Can I move that?
Followed by
Dave? Can I move
3.8s.
that?
Followed by 3.8.
Yeah. So, and seconded by Councillor Dave.
No, so the Mayor just suggested he would move it, seconded by you.
Okay. All right.
We're just going to update the motion to reflect that.
9.7. 15.7. Change that to 9.7.
So this number here, can you just work with Becca? Just
It's not balance.
You got to get that stuff. That would be right.
You have to have option 6, don't you?
well, Stephen, we'll just quickly, let's get this right. Let's get this right, Councillor. Sorry.
Option 3, change year 1 to 9.7.
It is option 3, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, these accountants, they can be helpful sometimes. Sorry. Yeah.
An amendment to make it over 2 years, 7 plus 7. If I have a seconder to spread it over the 2 years, well, I'll make it 7.7. Which just spreads out, I mean, I know, just gives people a little buffer, further buffer. So what, sorry?
So just to clarify, so if all of these motions and amendments are lost, the default position is 9.5, 9.5, which is in the draft budget. So just so you're aware, if all the motions and amendments are voted down, that's where we end up.
Which is the same, thanks Mr Mayor, it's the same issue I raised with the previous vote. I don't think this is a vote we should be doing by exception. We need to keep going until there's an outcome.
Well, there is the option, like we did previously, of raising multiple amendments and foreshadowing amendments to make sure we capture it.
Okay, you just want it that way. Just keep raising an amendment until...
Yeah, the amendments are allowed for my submission, but...
there's a motion on the books, and so someone has to move an amendment. We have a vote, and that's how it goes. We're not sort of... We've done all the preliminary work of working this out. We know the reasons for ending up where we did before. All we're doing is translating it onto this formal part.
Okay, so can we get back to the motion amendment on the board? And have we got a seconder for your one, Councillor Paula? Have we got a seconder?
Two 7s.
Okay. She's entitled to, as long as she moves. That's not, it's better to do that on another, isn't it? Oh, it doesn't really matter, because you've got to change what's underneath as well.
It's been seconded, Mark. Yeah. Becca, Councillor Tooman.
Just a question on
Councillor Tooman.
on the 7.7, does that put at risk our 230%?
No.
It doesn't. Okay, well, it doesn't.
We can't sit still, Councillor Pascoe, we're all over the place.
I know you're bobbing all over the place, yeah. I'm the only one who's asleep.
Excuse me, Becca. Excuse me, Becca. Over here. So up on the, so it's maximised debt to revenue with 2 years of rates increase,
Can we go to,
as opposed to 1.
can I move forward to debate?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, we'll go to debate. Councillor Dave.
Well, no, I didn't move it. You did.
I'm happy to wrap it up at
Well, look, councillors totally respect the right of Councillor Southgate to move that we split it over 2 years, but I point out to the whole floor here that we've had significant discussions about all the different permutations, and I believe it was clear preference of councillors that we deal with the rates increase necessary to eventually achieve balanced books in one hit so that we could return as quickly as possible to rate increases of only 3.8% per year. It's only the motion that does that. The amendment strings it out for a second year, and I don't think that that's it's not certainly not the cheapest option. It costs more, and especially in terms of interest charges, to do that over 2 years. There is pain. I would rather the pain was over and done with as quickly as possible, so we can return to what at least some regard as normality.
Okay, Councillor Ryan.
Point of clarity. Firstly.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
A turn will come.
So Ryan, I think you need to reserve your right if you want to keep speaking afterwards. Do you reserve your right to second? Oh, anyway. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Look, this is just an effort again to reflect public wishes to adapt to this new future in a way that they can accept and understand. Go easy. I agree with Dave. There's two approaches. This is one to be a little bit gentle on the ratepayers, and the other one is to go short, sharp shock and what have you. And I guess we could be tempted to avoid an increase next year because it's election year, isn't it? So, I mean, there would be a tendency to say get it over in this year, and then next year maybe people will have forgotten a little bit and will be down to the 3.8. But this is around listening to submissions. I think. Given the variability in these average rates, like we have been told by staff that 7% is the average, but it'll be wildly different on various ends of the spectrum anyway. So some people are still going to get a fairly swift slap with these rates, and this just, again, takes the top off that from my point of view. I don't expect this to be a successful move, but I think given that we're going to end up with the other position anyway, it's good to put this option up for public consideration. Oh, and by the way, I just wanted to add that the 3.8%, it's interesting that we get back to our 3.8%, because the 3.8% was always to transition from land value to capital value. Of course, now the 3.8% will have nothing to do with that. The 3.8% just goes on.
Councillor Rob.
Ryan's next.
Okay.
So
very little.
So
what is your point of order?
Incorrect information?
Yeah, well, fine. I'm happy to be,
stop.
I'm happy to be corrected.
Chief Executive.
3.8% was about incrementing our rates to a point that we could actually afford our growth program. So it's effectively pay down debt, so we reinvest it back into growth.
In this budget?
In all budgets.
In the previous council's budget?
Yes.
Councillor Ryan.
Mr Mayor, just point of clarity. Firstly, if I may, will there be debate on the second one, or is it you taking it all as one and then voting?
We're debating on the motion and the amendment.
Together?
Together.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Paula, for raising the issue. It gives us a chance to discuss, but as Councillor Dave mentioned, our whole gearing today was to suppress our activity to that 10% or below so that we could address it in one hit and move on and honour the commitment from Council previously at 3.8. So I will be voting down the amendment and supporting the motion.
Councillor Rob.
Thanks, Chair. None of these options are perfect. I'd be favouring the motion at a 9.7% increase. Ideally, it would be short and sharp to go for the 15.8, which would bring the books supposedly back into balance in 1 year. But I don't think we have that luxury to do that. So I think the 9.7 is a compromise of sort. I think delaying or spreading the increase over 2 years is fraught with a number of risks. Paula has already alluded to one of those risks, but the other risk is the citywide property revaluations, which are due later this year, which could further complicate the calculations when they come out next year. Not for everybody, but certainly for some of the residents around town. And that adds another potential bugbear, if you like, into the system. I did mention in the earlier discussion, and I'd just like to mention it again, there is one, because the 9.7 will not result in us balancing our books, so we will be in deficit, and as the next, I think, 2, maybe 3 years progresses, we will be seeing balancing the books under the new method in a deficit, and that's going to concern us, and no doubt it will put pressure on staff. And one of the red flags that I see in that, which we wouldn't get with the 15.8, is that there might be a reluctance around this table or around staff not to spend the money on maintenance and renewals, which of course is the main kick in this new budget. There's about $20 million plus in this budget from the 1st of July, which is there to make sure that we look after our assets, that is, we maintain them, and that we do spend the money on renewals when it's appropriate to do so. So that's a red flag to me, and I think we're going to have to be vigilant going forward during that deficit period to make sure that there's discipline around this table and with staff, that we do spend that money and we are true to what we've promised in the consultation document. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Mayor King. Like Rob, no, this isn't perfect. I don't like this option, the motion or the amendment really, but this is where we are. You know, I'd prefer the 3.8 followed by 3.8, 3.8, 3.8, like it was going to be. But that can't be, and we're not there. Look, there is such a thing as a slow, painful death. It usually starts with your fingernails and ends somewhere around your genitals. I don't want that. I'd rather have a short, sharp, quick death, a little bit like my predecessors from France. So I'm voting against the amendment. Yeah.
I think it's time you stop, Councillor. Let's move on. Councillor Mark.
Can I just have a couple of seconds to take that in without visualising? Okay, look, yeah. Look, this has been hard yakka, and as the previous speakers have said, it's not perfect. It's not great. I fully take your point on, Councillor Pascoe, about those red flags, and we are going to have to be vigilant if balancing our books is what we want to do. We're not going to balance the books in the first year, as you know, the Mayor would have liked, and then we're going to jump back to this magical 3.8. You know, to me, 3.8 is still too much. I would love to be representing ratepayers through a council that only increases costs with inflation. So I still think there's work to do. Even if we get down to this magical 3.8, that's not the base level. That's just a very well sold compounding rates increase as far as I can see. So there's still a lot of work to do. But this, I think, I will be supporting the now sudden-ish jump, because I'm actually at risk of trying to sound positive in a pretty bleak situation. I'm actually pretty pleased that we've gone from potentially 2 9.5% rate rises over 2 years to 1 9.7. So, I mean, well done. Thank you to everybody for guiding us to this point so far, but there's still a fair hunk of work to do.
Thank you. Interesting that Mark used the word perfect. The word perfect shouldn't even be mentioned in this debate. Again, we have failed to address our culture of overspending, and I'll just give you some context that the rate increase, that 9.7% rate increase, is less than what H3 lost this year. So this big rate increase that we've all got the heebie-jeebies over and are scared about and whatnot, swallowed all up by H3. So that's the context. And we will be facing the same issue in the next couple of years, I guarantee you, if we don't address our spending real quick. And from the discussions I've seen today, there is just no apple to do that. It's a shame, but there is just no apple to do it. So I foresee ratepayers facing the same issue again in 2 or 3 years. I guarantee you.
Councillor Angela.
Yeah, excuse me. Thanks, Mayor Andrew. Firstly, I just want to thank staff for all the work that they've done getting here. It's been a really long journey. Richard, your team, all of the staff actually involved, you've done a tremendous job. It hasn't been easy with the varied views around the table, so I thank you deeply for that. Councillor Gallagher said yesterday, I want to know what you stand for. Councillor Gallagher, I stand for our people. I have been consistent with my opposition to the way this budget was developed since March last year when the first 12% rates increase was proposed. Why? Because I stand with our people. I made a plan with our residents in 2015, and that plan agreed with them that they could rely on us to keep rates at 3.8% for the next 10 years. That was my idea, and that idea meant something to me, and it meant something to our residents. I made a plan with our residents to take it slow with the transition to from land to capital value. That meant something to me, and it did mean something to them. I made plans, and I made a commitment. Mayor Andrew, you said during the debate on playgrounds that you're not a big one for plans or for sticking to plans. Well, I'm the opposite. I like plans, especially ones that make us commit to something with our residents. The intent and the frustration of a review of any 10-year budget every 3 years was never, in my opinion, meant to be a wholesale change. It's there to make adjustments, to recognise that things change over time, but to make adjustments. The intent is never, in my opinion, to throw an entire plan out and start again from scratch. But unfortunately, that's what's happened. Unfortunately, the previous plan that I was committed to and that I promised our residents is unrecognisable and impossible to compare with what's on the table today. The plans that I had and the commitment that I made is unrecognisable today. As we heard, the Mayor has the right to lead the budget. I respect that, and I've been actually very supportive of your right to do that through this. But that's where we part ways, and I've been consistent on that. This budget is built on your priorities and your vision for the city, and I support and accept that as well. But they are not my priorities for our city, and I have been consistent since March last year on that. Things are changing, our economy is changing, and that worries me as well. Fuel prices are at a record high. The government is slowing migration. The boom, I feel, is coming to an end. But what comes next worries me as well. I committed to a plan and a vision for the city that is...
Excuse me, Councillor. We are out of time.
Yep.
But just Councillor O'Leary, you can keep going to wrap up, but this isn't the last debate. We agreed to 5 minutes each for the last debate, and that is coming up at the next, the wrap up, what you're doing now is coming up at the next vote, at the final vote for the night. So you are out of time, but you are going to get 5 minutes coming up.
I don't want to speak.
Councillor Martin, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I'm not aware that I addressed personally, but I do. Ultimately, all elected members will be on what they support, what cuts would they make, you know, what it would look like. And obviously, yes, under the new executive mayor, the mayor originally puts out his or her budget, and then it is tested through the council process. But the point at which a budget goes to the LTP, to the consultation process, it becomes the council's budget. So the mayor starts it, but it does become the council's budget by majority vote. There are three of us left in this chamber when Julie Hardacre assumed the mayoralty: Councillor O'Leary, Councillor McPherson and myself, and Councillor Julie Hardacre had to make some controversial, tough proposals where she proposed an 8% rate increase in her first year or second year, as I recall it, and there were some tough decisions to make. So the nature of government, the nature of being in a council is to make those tough decisions. I take to a degree Councillor Mallett's point, and I also say that I am not complacent to think that we can just ad infinitum carry on 3.8, 3.8. That is not a very good plan. That's in excess of CPI, and there's a point in 10 or 15 years where that just becomes also unsustainable. It does show the way in which we fund local government is terribly flawed and broken, and we have to look at other tools and maybe the combo of savings and different ways of doing things. So to think we've arrived at a perfect solution, absolutely not. However, in terms of the needing to live within our means to balance the books, and there will be debate about what we do and what we don't do, I think that this motion, in terms of the main motion, is better than we were at. I do think we are trying to progress to a fairer rating system, but as Councillor Pascoe said, any tax or rating system is going to affect people in different ways. It is not ultimately fair for particular individuals, fairer for others. But I will, with sombreness, genuinely, because I know it's going to have a hit and it's going to have a kick and it's not good, but this I think we've arrived at now at the best we could given the circumstances.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote. So it's the Southgate 2-min amendments that we're voting on first.
The amendment is lost, 11 against, 2 for.
Now we'll vote on the motion.
The motion is carried, 10 for, 3 against.
Okay, so now we'll go to the final vote for the night. So this is on page 40, and it's number HI.
That's I. So
HI, yeah.
So if you look at the piece of paper that Sean gave out the deliberations, the final vote is up there.
Okay, so at the beginning of the meeting, this is when we moved that we would have 5 minutes each plus a 2 minutes, 2 minutes extra time, which was agreed, and unless you would. Sorry, is it 1 minute? Oh, sorry, I thought it was 5 and 2, but unless you want to, sorry.
No, it's 3.
No, well, does somebody? Councillor Rob, are you comfortable to move a motion to bring it back to 2 and 1?
Well, I was just quoting what was in standing order, that we weren't going to change standing orders. Is it 5 and 2 in standing orders, is it? It's 5 minutes. I was more concerned about losing the 5 minutes rather than the 2 on the other end.
Okay. So
I suspect, this is only my personal view, that probably we've all said everything that we wanted to say, but we shouldn't deny anyone a chance to.
So I'll move, seconded by the Deputy Mayor.
And your role as the Deputy Mayor, not based on your views or ideology, just to be clear.
Okay, so we'll go straight to debate. Deputy Mayor.
Just thank staff for moving.
Or do you want to reserve your right till later? I'll reserve the right. Okay. Councillor James.
No. I'm speaking later in the debate.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Look, this has actually been one of the hardest things I've done probably in my life, and it's probably one of the hardest things a few of us have done. It's not easy telling the ratepayer out there that they have to pay or have a rates increase of 9.7%, followed by 3.8s, and go into the CV within 3 years. Like many, I was voted into council here to look after the ratepayers, look after the interests and their money, and we come in here with the very best interest to do so. But obviously, being a new councillor, I have stepped into some sort of storm here, and we've had to weather it out and come to a solution. Not the most ideal solution. It's something I didn't want to, have to tell people that that's what we're doing. But unfortunately, that's where we are. If we have to apologise for the public where we are, then we apologise. But we have to get this right. Thank you.
Councillor David.
Thank you. I haven't yet thanked the staff any of these debates today, and I know I give them a hard time at times, but they've actually done a great job. And in my experience of working on LTPs and before that 10 and 20-year strategic plans, this has actually been the one where we had the most information as we went along, and therefore the most choices and the most informed choices. And that was down to the staff that happened, and the CEO's leadership as well, I think. I'd also like to especially thank the CEO, and there hasn't been much acceptance of this, I don't believe, for his acceptance of the challenge to save a further $30 million over the 10-year period, close to $30 million. That's actually what got this whole exercise to a better point than I think many of us really genuinely thought we would achieve. If we hadn't got that, we wouldn't be in a position that, while definitely not great, is miles better than where we started or where it could have been. I think for many of you it's your first LTP, but this is actually one of the best humoured of the LTPs I've been through. Less aggravation in this, even though there was a bit from time to time, but less aggravation than in many I've been involved in the past. And we've also ended up in a better position, ironically, than a number of other councils have in terms of the extended rates increases and high rates increases they've been putting through. And that's quite something to say for a growth council, actually, where huge pressures have come on us. That's partly because of the way that our staff have worked through things with us, and the willingness of councillors also to be quite flexible about the way they approached it, and not necessarily go all out for their number one choice, but being willing to compromise over choices that they could live with. And I think big ups really to all of the council for coming up with something that we can live with. Even though it's going to be hard, we can live with it. And I think finally, thank you to the Mayor for for pushing us in the right direction and being willing to accept being pulled back a couple of times as well. So thank you.
Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And like Councillor Dave, I also just want to thank all of you as elected members. It's been sort of a whirlwind 3 months for me, coming right into this LTP, and but man, what a rush! Mr. Mayor, I applaud you for having the courage to address some of these issues. Some of them haven't been easy, or probably most of them actually have been pretty controversial, but at the end of the day, they've been conversation starters for a lot of the community, and I think it's been a catalyst for a lot of conversations. So that's a positive thing. I think we also have to remember that it's not all doom and gloom. We talk about this rates rise. It's actually, and I don't mean to belittle it, but it's only a 5% lift on the 3.8. So it's not actually this whopper rates increase that the media would have you believe. It's actually a reasoned adjustment based on some historic flaws, I guess, of council, but also to front up with the growth that we're facing. So I don't think we need to all hide in shame. We've got an issue and we're addressing it. And as elected members and senior leadership team, you've got to have big shoulders to carry that responsibility. But the flip side of that is actually an honour and a privilege to serve and to make those decisions. So I think we can all be very proud of that. And I'm pleased to see a lot of collaboration stepping out of the community too, and that shows a high level of engagement, and that came through in the submissions too. So thank you all.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. First of all, let me add my vote of thanks to staff across all parts of this organisation, because goodness knows I have asked lots of questions and kept them busy myself, and I don't always agree with their perspective, and I challenge it, but I've always found them exceptionally respectful and helpful, and I appreciate that immensely. A couple of years ago, only 3 years ago in fact, payers felt like they had some certainty of the future of their rates, and that vanished overnight. Payers now face huge increases well in excess of some of the increases in their income, household incomes, and inflation. When I got in council, I was disappointed to see the state of some of our council facilities. It's not acceptable to me to let existing council facilities fall into disrepair, as did happen with Founders and Waterworld. We do live in a fast-growing city and an ageing city, and facilities need both regular maintenance, but also at some point in time they need renewal or replacement. And I strongly agree with the priority in the financial plan that we must take proper care of what we already have. And to me personally, that must take priority over the shiny new projects. However, I also know that Hamiltonians deserve a good quality city, and so we've got to say yes to some progress. This should happen in an affordable way, in line with plans and strategies that the public have been involved in and have adopted. I've heard it said many times that we must take care of our vulnerable, and I totally agree. However, I might have a different view of vulnerable than other people, because this is not done through large unexpected rates increases, nor through transferring the impact onto lower value homeowners through uniform annual charges. It is not expensive new community projects. I actually supported a lot of the smaller investments in the community because I believe they can bring great outcomes. So I'm very grateful to my colleagues who've supported me with things such as an increase in the community grants, which I know people will be very grateful for. A little bit of love to the Central City Library, and of course something that was missing from the proposal, which was some care and attention for the front of the zoo. So, you know, look, there's been some wins. We're actually in year 4 of the 2015-2025 long-term plan. This is not year 1 of the new long-term plan. I don't share that view with some of my colleagues, that every 3 years we can come in and completely rewrite the future and ignore previous commitments or promises to the community. However, I absolutely applaud the previous council's approach to debt, and I acknowledge that they have in fact reduced that. But I'm disappointed, I was disappointed, I won't be the only one out of the new councillors to discover that council was not living within its means, that renewal and maintenance budgets were squeezed just a little bit too hard. I've never, in all my 17 years on local government, stood for no rates increases. I have in fact been part of quite large rates increases when the need was there. But this plan and the priorities that underpin it go well beyond my comfort zone. And I've heard the voice of many submitters who feel their promises were broken, and that we broke our promises, and that they simply can't afford to absorb, excuse me, I'm so tired at this time of night, to absorb such hefty increases overnight. So probably I can't afford to, I can't support this plan in its present form, as it is unaffordable in my view, has the wrong priorities, and has not sufficiently demonstrated that the council has listened to submitters. However, I have tried to participate constructively and usefully in the rate setting and the discussion about various different projects, and none of us are going to agree on everything. So I respect my fellow councillors for fighting the fight for what they believe in, and I'm just standing up for what I think the people wanted me to stand up for. Thanks.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew, and thank you, Mayor Andrew. It's been a tougher process on you than I think anybody. I want to also thank the staff, in particular Leanne. This has been a really tough session on you, and I've admired your coolness under pressure and your even-handedness. Thank you, Richard, and your team of senior leaders. A bunch of stars. Thank you very much for guiding us through this. I mean, you're listening to a guy who 18 months ago didn't even know that DCs existed or didn't know what a DC was. All I knew was that we were relying on them for income or something. That's all I knew. I didn't even know what a 10-year plan was, and while I knew my way around a governance table, that's the level that new councillors come into this place at. And here we are in a 2-day solid meeting making decisions this important. So this has been very, very hard. We've all gone on about how hard it is, but to me this has been an immense privilege. This has been the hardest 18 months of my life so far, emotionally and intellectually too. I think it's been tougher than a university degree learning this stuff, but I'm very proud of what I have learned and what we have achieved so far. I'm also, yep, it's not ideal, but I'm also very, very proud of a lot of things that came out of this this 10-year plan. You know, as I said during the on the theatre, when not so long ago, when I was considering running for council, we had a library pool and a theatre, and now we've got none. But as a result of this 10-year plan, we're getting the library back with a nice new frontage, I hope, and we are one step closer to getting that jolly great theatre. And I'm thrilled of the work done earlier on and getting that pool back up to scratch anyway, or at least getting it back to zero. I'm thrilled with the transport initiatives. I'm delighted with that. That was a real big one for me, and I'm excited that we've been able to reflect the large emphasis on cycling during the submissions that came through powerfully. And I certainly hope that what we've done with the biggest ever spend on alternative transport and intention with that, I certainly hope we've done right by the community. I'm excited about, or pleased with as Ryan mentioned, the collaboration that seems to be taking place with some really big players, and I referenced the gardens in that, and of course the theatre. I'm pleased that the Central City Park has gone from a $25 million buy and bowl to a $7 million buy and hold. I'm extremely disappointed with the way Peacock's panned out. Through this last long time, have been boldly staying in the dance, as I was urged to do. If you leave the dance, people will stop playing with you. If you leave the dance, but it's non-binding, it's non-binding, it's non-binding. And to me, this was the time that I was pretty much ready to leave the dance, but when I went to leave the dance, the door was shut and the bus had gone. So I give this here and now that I'm still not convinced that building Peacocks is a wise thing to do when it comes to our debt threshold. So I will be looking very, very closely at that, and I'll be making some uncomfortable noises, and this time I will have the courage to say no, because I think there was a stage there where a lot of us were uncomfortable, but we didn't have the courage to put up anything better. So I will be looking at it closely, and hey, you never know. Peacocks may be the right thing for me when it comes to sign the document. It may not, but I'm putting it out there that I will have the courage to say no. There were various stars. Of course, with the staff. Even Laura taking away the cups. I mean, stuff you don't see or we take for granted. Those were the stars. One of the stars for me was Councillor Ryan, who I think has made, has like he said, jumped into this, and he made some great speeches and some great points. And so, well done, mate. Well done. Very cool. So, thus endeth for me the 10-year plan. I will be supporting it, get to that next stage that it needs to get to. And thank you, colleagues, for putting up with my very bad dad jokes, my occasional popping shirt, and accidentally inappropriate comments.
Councillor Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. So there's a big rate rise today, and it hurts. But if there is a redeeming feature about it, what's come out of today, it's the fact that we've removed that immediate move to capital value, which was causing a dramatic impact for people. That's the one that probably drew the most heat during these submissions. I think Gary does make a point about spending, and to a degree that's fair enough. But I think we also have to remember that we didn't actually have a hell of a lot of room to move. We did inherit this operating deficit, and that needs to be remembered. So as a councillor, a new councillor in my first LTP, I have to say, it's a very interesting experience. Massive respect for the staff and the huge work and their professionalism. The CEO, Andrew, well done. I think I've enjoyed your leadership, and it's a big day that we got here today. Other senior councillors, Dave, thank you for your leadership. But I do have a tinge of disappointment to your senior councillors for leadership. And I was disappointed tonight with some of Angela's comments, because this is a democracy and we all have different views, and that's the way it should be. But I also feel that there is a responsibility for councillors to have ideas, and it's fine to oppose things and to vote against things and to say no, but I would also expect councillors who've been around for a while to actually have some ideas, some visions that they can actually present, rather than just it's about the people. I mean, there was Peacocks went through, and there was no real opposition to that. The DC policy went through, which some people voted against. But to me, I didn't see a lot of tangible, solid ideas for a different way forward. And I just, so I'm just putting that out there. To me, there's some irony in Councillor O'Leary taking the...
Point of order, Chair.
What's the point of order?
Point of order, paragraph 313(7), subsection F. Use of disrespectful, offensive or malicious language.
Continue, please, but don't name any councillors.
So overall, it's been tough, but I think we've tried to strike a balance between keeping the rates low, but at the same time giving those in the city, and there are many who actually want to see it go ahead as well, the encouragement they deserve there, and we have listened to the submitters. I was extremely disappointed after the draft LTP debates in December, and I said so. This time, less so, because I think we have made some massive progress. We have listened, we have taken some brave, difficult decisions, and most of us have worked together to get the best possible result for the city.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, and I also echo the sentiments about the work that's gone in staff that led by the CEO, Andrew's leadership of the meetings. You've tried very, very hard to keep the humour up and to try and keep things rolling along, and it has been bloody tough, I appreciate. It's very tough.
Thank you.
I appreciate what you've done, even in that institute. But I am saddened. I think that the last 2 days has been, there's been a lot of missed opportunities, but then I think the last 2 years there's been missed opportunities too. I think we have, and some people will find this offensive, but I don't care, that we have relentlessly increased expenditure throughout the term, and going forward that's what we're doing. I mean, total expenses are going up by 12% next year, 56% over the 10-year plan. Personnel costs are going up 8% next year, 43% over the 10-year plan. Depreciation's going up 12% next year, 66% over the 10-year plan. Finance costs are going up 10% next year, 33% over the 10-year plan. Operating costs are going up 23% next year, 91% over the 10-year plan. Professional costs are going up 52% next year, 34% over the 10-year plan. Admin costs are going up next year 8%, 46% over the 10-year plan. And property costs are going up 3% next year and 36% over the 10-year plan. There is no way in the world we can avoid going through this again if this happens. And we've got, you know, we've got the gorilla in the room, the H3 organisation, which, look, I'm not blaming Sean or anyone like that. They inherited some, I think, poor decisions that previous councils. But as I said in one of my previous Finance Committee reports, we have become comfortably numb to that. We have let this thing, as I said, you know, next year's rate increase is less than what H3 is going to lose next year, this year, beg your pardon. I mean, it's astonishing, and that's a dirty great gorilla in the corner of the room that we're just all pretending is not there. So anyway, but however, I will approve the 10-year plan going forward, because we have to do that, and we have to, you know, at least it starts to balance our books earlier on. We've got to deal with our debt issues, but colleagues, we really need to address our expenditure situation, because we are going to, I mean, I bet Julie thought she was going to sort it out with the 8%, then 3%. I bet she genuinely thought she was going to sort it out. And I bet Andrew and the rest of us think we're sorting it out now. But I promise you we won't. It will come back in about 3 years' time. So I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. Thank you.
Councillor Leo.
Yeah, Mayor Andrew, here we are. It's what, 9:22 p.m. On a Friday night of Queen's birthday weekend. Some of the staff over there, they probably thought about getting away for the long weekend, to tell you the truth. But here they are, sitting here at this time of night. And I think who would be brave enough to be a general manager or a CEO at the Hamilton City Council? The hours put in are unbelievable. I know I used to think I was doing some fairly hours when I was doing 55 hours a week when I was at work. But I guarantee these guys are doing a hell of a lot more. I've had a bit of a non-win sort of a day today. I've voted against most issues in order to try and reduce some of the costs. But unfortunately, I haven't had a lot of luck, to tell you the truth. But that's the breaks. You win some and you lose some. However, the sun will come up again at 7:24 tomorrow morning. And it'll be another day. So hopefully tomorrow I might buy a lotto ticket. I might have a bit more luck than I've had today. But this is democracy, and you win some and you lose some. As far as I'm concerned, it's a hell of a lot better result than I thought we might have got. We're 9.7, I think it is, we've finished at. And that's a hell of a lot more comfortable than what we were going to be facing. Initially, of course, I think back in March, I think we were facing about a 16% rate increase there and then. And settling on this, I think we should be able to move on, and I will be supporting the final motion.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Well, it is late, and I do feel for the staff, and I just want to thank them as well. Unbelievable, tremendous work, and especially we saw it firsthand through a pre-consultation process, and through long hours. We've done a few long hours here over the last 18 months, and it's been hard as a new council to be part of the LTP process, but it's also been a privilege. I was actually really excited about the many submissions, and but I do feel this process has not done justice to what our ratepayers wanted. So I'm very sad where we've ended up, and as Councillor Leary said, it is getting harder for the people out there, and we're just adding on to the hardship. So that's why I cannot support this report. But I am looking forward to the $85 million savings over the next 10 years.
Councillor Robb.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And thanks everyone for staying awake. I see I'm the second to last speaker. I too would like to pay respect and thank the staff, to Richard and your team right across the organisation, for your availability and the rapid response, often at some unusual times that emails came to me, to queries that I had, some of them quite stupid queries, but answered in a very, very professional way, and I do respect the availability of the right people on a timely basis to come back to us. On the more serious side, I guess, and I think also thank Mayor Andrew for initially leading off the plan. But in the period since the December deliberations, I've reread a textbook I used when lecturing undergrad students. And the textbook called The Smartest Guys in the Room, and it details the story behind a major US corporate failure in 2001. And I think amongst the many lessons of this failure, 3 emerge which I think are quite relevant to this plan and us taking this plan forward. The first one is, if you say something often enough, you and the organisation will eventually believe it's true. And I think in this journey, we have been selling very hard the suggestion that we've already borrowed millions of dollars to fund day-to-day expenditure, when the evidence suggests otherwise. And then finally, when putting together this package, I read in paragraph 51, we're finally openly reporting an increase of 21 million in OPEX from the 1st of July to fund growth, maintenance and renewals. And that, to me, is why this rate increase is really needed. And I think I add on to Gary's sort of concerns that we do need to keep a very, very close watch on our spending, because here's a new $21 million. Now, maybe there's an argument to say we should have had that available and spent it in the past too. And we might have had our swimming pool and our library and our Founders Theatre. But we need to be very, very careful about the spending. Clearly, we should have, in this report, convinced our stakeholders that this expenditure is justified. The second, and this is the Enron scandal, which is about the smartest guys in the room, also noted that there were deficiencies in the methods of financial accounting. And despite significant improvements since the Enron failure in 2001, much of the confusion this council has debated in recent months is over understanding our financial accounts and the different results that are often reported with quite material differences. A lesson here is the need to take a little more emphasis on our cash flow to support financial results. At least 2 contributors to the LTP consultation in recent weeks raised the need to assess Council's progress based on positive or negative cash flows. And I don't profess that that is the sole arbiter for how we're progressing, but it's something that perhaps we don't put enough emphasis on in terms of where we're going. And finally, the third one for Enron was that it failed to recognise the concerns and needs of its shareholders and customers. And I think in this lesson, Council needs to seriously consider its governance role and recognise the views and the effects its decisions have on stakeholders. And in this area, I feel quite comfortable and congratulate, again, staff and this Council on the extensive consultation we did, because I think we got the best possible feedback that we could have expected from what was, I believe, a very, very complex long-term plan. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Thank you. I want to actually compliment a former pupil of mine, Gary Mallett, and also not a former pupil, I should have been his pupil, Councillor Pascoe, for you know, when you have your quiet moments, you turn over those words and you turn over those messages. Because believe you me, we are dealing with a local government financial situation and fundraising rating system that is severely flawed. We have tonight voted to speed the transition to join the rest of the country of how we rate, which is a combination of capital value and UAGC over a 3-year period. And even in that act alone, there will be surely winners and losers. We have, in my view, an unfair situation where people with lesser value properties are paying more rates than people with greater value properties. In the end, in 3 years' time, that roughly will be sorted, and we will be joining the rest of the country. But as Councillor Pascoe said, any tax, any rates ultimately strikes people in different ways. The retired person who's living alone in that sort of so-called asset expensive house is paying a huge whack per week for services versus, say, a family of 4 who are living next door, in terms of, you know, the per person fee that you pay, because it's not based on a person's income, but obviously based on the value of their property. I fully respect, and then obviously we are faced with similar problems to Auckland, Tauranga and Queenstown. We're one of the 4 or 5 major, at this point, growth regions. As Councillor O'Leary pointed out, that can change. The economy can turn around very rapidly, and I fully respect that we have great challenges to try and, if you like, ride those waves of growth and also potential troughs in our economy. Next year, obviously, every 2 years there is a council election and there's a mayoral election, and I fully, in a democracy, respect those who will choose to seek that role, and they will lay their vision for their vision of the city, what they stand for, what they don't agree with, but where they want to see the city go. Julie Hardacre, who was successful, did that. The current mayor did that as well, and obviously I respect that was quite a close election as it turns out. So the budget initially becomes, if you like, the mayor's blueprint, green print, red print. But as I said before, it then actually is either adopted or agreed on by the majority of councillors or not. What I do want to say is there is, in my view, with respect, some strong consistency with the previous council. Every council must be the author of its own destiny. It cannot be beholden to a previous council. That is democracy. That is why you have an election of every 3 years, and you elect a mayor, and you presumably know the vision and you know what you're signing up for. But okay, let's look. I think if I had a theme of this council, we are improving and increasing our partnerships. The Momentum Theatre proposal, in my view, coupled with the ongoing transformation of the CBD, the revitalisation of Garden Place, the potential to secure some heritage properties or improve links to the river, and also, I also think actually the river is advancing, but we are calibrating that to current opportunities which are presented by the theatre, bringing possibly momentum raising money for the bridge across the river sooner rather than later. We are being nimble, but basically that broad progress is there. Also, the innovative transport package, where we're now addressing the link to Auckland. We are promoting cycling and walking. I think that's consistent with what the previous council was trying to do. This mayor, and credit where credit's due, just be fair, with Councillor Bell, we looked at each other when she was a great believer in libraries 5 or 6 years ago. We'd never thought we would get the North East Library up. It was unfunded. This mayor proposed that we get on and give the people of the North East a library and community centre. Well, if that is not a great social gain, what is? Lake Whaiwhakariki. We are following the leadership of Dr. Bruce Clarkson and working with that group partnership. The zoo plan, I think, again, a positive development. Acknowledge Councillor Leary and others with the development of the zoo plan. Under this mayor, this council, we are delivering on the zoo plan. The playgrounds, the living spaces, we are progressing. Those destination playgrounds started under the previous council. There is progress there. I disagreed with the sale of pensioner housing fund, but the sale of pension housing, that debate is gone. The positive outcome, however, very pleased, compliments to Councillor Pascoe and McPherson. We are investing in a realistic way to assist.
Seconded by Mark.
Yeah, we are investing in a realistic way in a social housing fund. Okay, so that is the good news. The less good news, I guess, is we've had to face the very critical financial issues and face up to some hard decisions which Councillor Pascoe and others have alluded to. Finally, I'm on a number of boards. Compared with another board, this is somewhat easy, relatively speaking, if I can say. I don't want to say too much more. That is quite character building, but what I make the point is I like this chief executive and I like this staff because we have actually got wonderful staff who actually want to help us. And I think it was who was saying, I've forgotten it was Queen's birthday weekend. I'm sure they haven't. I didn't even realise it was on. But I just want to finally say thank you to the whole team, not people in this room tonight, there, but everyone. Thank you.
Councillor Angela.
I've participated in every step of the way of this process because I believe in something else and fight for something else. It is very unfair to say that as a hard-working councillor, and I'm sure no one in this room would disagree with me on that I haven't offered up any solutions. I have participated in every single debate that we've had. But as I said earlier in my debate, this budget is far removed from my priorities. I have shown respect in consideration to the views and priorities of all of the members around this chamber. I have helped many of those members around the table with things that are important to them, even when I have disagreed with them. I should be afforded the same. My priorities have been accumulated over the 10 years that I've been in this building and working for the people of the city, and you can't ask me to drop that just because it's a new council, just because you're here now around the table. And let me warn you that you will experience some of that concern and some worry about the things that you've worked on when a new council is appointed next term. Standing up for the people of this city is important to me, and it is enough of a challenge. It is enough of an idea.
So this process has been hard on the ratepayers and the staff and the councillors. But the rate increase has ended up being single digits, about half of where it started. After 30 years in 10 councils, Peacock Growth Cell will open with 8,000 sections, with $175 million of central government benefit for our city. We have decided to continue to streamline our systems and work to lower red tape to make it easier to deal with this council. I believe we will be more transparent after the 1st of July this year. Our balancing the budget measure doesn't count development contribution levies to balance our books, as central government requires. It has been a long journey for us all. Personally, the burden has been heavy and the criticism has been relentless. But I know I've been put into this role for such a time as this. I acknowledge those who have supported me over the past year. Staff, you've just really put a huge effort in. Sean and your team, David and your team, just so many of you, and all the way down through the organisation. It's just been massive. The Chief Executive, this has been really hard on him too. It's taken a toll on him. My colleagues, you've done really well. My wife Anne's been a constant support. I thank the people who pray for me, and I honour God, my guide, who has carried the burden with me. Elected members, staff and the residents of Hamilton Kirikiriroa are now free to run forward on a sound financial foundation while we also look after our community. So thank you all for working together to achieve this outcome. To the board to vote.
Anticlimactic, really, isn't it?
Sorry, we've called for the vote. Excuse me, no talking. We have called for the vote. Do you need it? Gary, shh.
The motion is carried 10-4, 3 against.
Let's party, it's the weekend. Woo! Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. There's nothing on Tuesday now that I'm aware of.
Councillor Toomey, we don't have authority to